Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to this 52nd session of LUMS Live. LUMS Live के 52वें सेशन में आपका खुशामदीद। इससे पहले कि हम अपनी बातचीत का बाकायदा आगाज़ करें, मैं आपके सिर्फ याद दहाने के लिए बताना चाहता हूँ कि ये हमारा 52nd सेशन है। इससे पहले 51 सेशंस आप हमारे फेसबुक के पेज पर ऑनलाइन देख सकते हैं। उसमें हमने डिफरेंट मौज़ूआत पे बात की है, जिसमें टेक्नोलॉजी के बारे में भी, ह्यूमन बिहेवियर के बारे में भी, साइंस, आर्ट, टेक्नोलॉजी, ह्यूमैनिटीज़, बिजनेस, सब टॉपिक्स पे हमने बात की है। और एक बड़ी ज़बरदस्त रिपोजिटरी है ऑफ वैल्यूएबल इंसाइट्स from people all over the world and more importantly from all over Pakistan. So I invite you on the behalf of LUMS कि आप उन sessions जाके देखें और they will certainly add more value to your knowledge base. आज का सेशन बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग सेशन है। जैसे मैं आपसे पहले कह चुका हूँ कि हम इस टॉपिक पे टोटल 4 सेशंस रन कर रहे हैं, जिसमें हम टेक्नोलॉजी एंड टेक इंडस्ट्री को पाकिस्तान के अंदर एक्सप्लोर करना चाह रहे हैं। सो हमारा पहला सेशन सॉफ्टवेयर इंडस्ट्री के ऊपर था। हमारा सेकंड सेशन सॉफ्टवेयर इंडस्ट्री प्लस इंटरसेक्शन विद डिजिटाइजेशन के ऊपर था। और तीसरा सेशन विच इज़ ऑल्सो वेरी क्लोज टू माई हार्ट इज़ एक्चुअली ऑन द गेम इंडस्ट्री इन पाकिस्तान, वेयर वी आर एंड वेयर आर वी हेडिंग टू, और हमारा फ्यूचर कैसे लगता है। We have an excellent panel today. We have Faraz Ahmed, CEO Turbo Labz हैं. We have Abbas Saleem Khan, Optera Digital के CEO हैं. And we have Murad Akhter from Tintash, CEO Tintash. इससे पहले कि हम आगे चलें और अपना पहला सवाल अपनी ऑडियंस के सामने, अपने पैनल के सामने रखें, I'd like to begin this session by quoting the CEO of Netflix. I have taken it from a recent article. In early 2019, Netflix का CEO जो थे, उनसे उनके stakeholders ने पूछा about the future and about the competition, and he said he thought was that companies' stiffest competition wasn't actually HBO, wasn't actually Disney Plus, and wasn't actually Amazon. And he also said it wasn't even cable television or movie theaters. In his estimation, the biggest threat to the Netflix continuous dominance in entertainment was the video game Fortnite. And that was Netflix telling us in 2019. And he really said a very beautiful thing, actually quoted in the article, that it used to be what to watch, and now it's whether to watch. There's a head of strategy at Amazon, and the answer is increasingly no. I'm going to play a game. So that really shows the trend that how our entertainment industry is taking a big shift, or हम कैसे from this cable and television and movie type of entertainment से कैसे more interactive and engaging type of entertainment में जा रहे हैं. So दुनिया में, I'll not say a lot about the world. We know that gaming industry is a $1 billion industry, and people are saying that we might be touching in a couple of years 200 billion plus, and about 2.7 billion people actually play a game. In Pakistan, we don't have many established reports, but for example, IGDA Pakistan tells us that there are more than 25 million of revenue hai, jo ki hum earn karte hain locally across industry, and there are more than 8,000 people, 10,000 people jo ki directly, indirectly is industry ke sath relate bhi karte hain. And if you really think about the freelancing industry and look at the sort of more high-level view, there might be more people. So unlike the core software industry, Pakistan ki jo game industry, it seems relatively smaller. But it is expanding. It seems that it's expanding, and it's moving in a right direction. But is it really a hypothesis? Is it me reading an article on Dawn News and telling you that we're going in the right direction, or it is actually happening? So for that, we have this excellent panel, and my first question would be to this panel, first to really explain that who they are, what kind of industry they are in, how do they define their own game industry, how did they come into this industry, what have they been doing in the last few years? And after that, I'll take forward with my first question. So starting with you, Abbas.
My name is Abbas Saleem Khan. I am veteran of the gaming industry for about 20 years. I worked on everything from AAA in the 2000s, downright to working in AR and VR as of late. I've also produced animation recently, well, 5 years ago. It's been 5 years. 5 years ago, I was producing Burke Avenger seasons 3 and 4. Apart from being the CEO of Optera Digital, which is a transmedia company, which focuses a lot on gamified UX, I'm also the chair for IGDA Pakistan, which sort of tries to bridge, build a relationship between developers and the rest of the industry.
Excellent. Thank you, Abbas. Faraz.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us here, Dr. Shahid. It's good to be here. My name is Faraz Ahmed. Dr. Shahid already introduced us. I'm the CEO of Turbo Labs. I've been in the games industry in Pakistan for 15 years now. We started off with PC games. We launched Cricket Revolution. I don't know if everybody's heard about it, but it did make some headlines. And after our first PC game, we moved into mobile games, inspired by Mr. Murad here. Essentially, he was the first guy to tell us that there's a new device in the market, and we should stop making PC games and jump onto this. And that's exactly what we did. And we've been pursuing that for 10 years now. I was initially co-founded Mindstorm Studios. It's one of the largest mobile gaming studios in Lahore and Pakistan. And now I've followed up a new startup that goes by the name of Turbo Labs, which also does mobile games, but it's focused on social multiplayer games. And our first title is a chess-based social game. It has over 1 million downloads now and over 100,000 monthly active users playing the game, and it's growing rapidly. So that's our focus. We're essentially all about mobile games, and how Abbas introduced himself. It's important to understand that the games industry is vast. It's not games is too generic a term. It's almost like saying IT now, because it really depends upon the kind of game you're developing. It changes the entire business model, the nature of your team, and the kind of work that you do. So that's us, and look forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Murad, please.
Thank you, Dr. Shahid. Thanks from me also for organizing this talk today and this panel. My own background is similar to Faraz in the sense that I'm a software engineer by sort of trade, and then I started Tintash 2007. So have been in the games industry for about 13 years. Before this, I was at Apple. So that's why I thought that mobile games would take over the world, because I had, had the wonderful opportunity to sort of be at the company that sort of, jump-started the whole smartphone revolution. And then at Tintash, we've been working on games for other people. So our call to fame, I think, would be Stick Cricket, which we made for a company called Stick Sports. So our team, did all the development work, and but it was their idea, their vision. And we've done a lot of work for other game companies like Pocket Jams, Digital Chocolate, PlayFirst, many of them. So I think our journey has been to learn from developing those games, with a Western sort of focus. And lately we've been making some of our own games in the hyper casual space, where Babar, who's Faraz's brother, has been helping us steer the waters as part of Lion Studios. And I think for us, the journey has been to sort of learn the trade first. Okay, what are the tools? What are the technologies? What are the key skills which we don't know yet? And then from that, to developing a vision for the space. Where should we be? How should we sort of approach this entire industry? And I think for me personally, it's been this realization, okay, this is not part of really the tech sector, it's part of the entertainment sector. Yeah. And there is a lot of overlap, of course. But the hardest thing for an engineer to accept is, the technology is important, but it's only a small part of the entire industry.
Excellent. And this really nicely connects me with my first major question, and I'll straight away begin with the elephant in the room, and that is that what were the challenges in the past few years in this game industry when you started establishing this whole different way of bringing entertainment to people, and where do we stand now? Do you think we have come a long way? Do you think we're still not there yet? And how do you look at the future? Because I'll begin with the future before connecting with the past. So maybe Murad, we can start with you and then we can go back to Faraz and Abbas.
Sure. I think basically it's all about an audience and figuring out, okay, who is your audience and how do you connect to them. So the games industry worldwide is split across multiple geographies. The largest one is North America, right? America is the largest game sort of market. Canada, English-speaking countries, US, UK, Australia, and so on. And unke saath, if you want to connect, it's a very specific type of games that do really well over there. Sports key games, NFL, and so on. Those do well. Action games, RPGs, lots of games that people write about kind of violence and or all of these negative things also come up when people explain. I think for us, it's been sort of figuring out, okay, how do we connect to an audience that is not really, we don't live there, right? So we're living in Pakistan, thinking about what kind of things appeal to them. Most of us that enjoy playing games, we actually play the same games, but they don't use the same themes of our culture, our environment, it's not like this film industry here, yeah, television here, where you can use local stories and local themes and get the same audience. So there's been sort of this dichotomy of how do you operate as a company that needs to appeal to an audience that's foreign to you, and also how do you bridge the gaps? So जो आपकी अपनी audience है, your own population, usko how do you reach them when the business structures don't exist? We don't currently have the same kind of environment that would allow us to market to them, reach out to them, encourage them to spend money on games. And this is a constant sort of discussion between us when we get together. कि local market को कैसे tap करें. So for me, it's like all about connecting to the audience and how you can go ahead and do that.
Faraz, extending to this point, अब तो हमने ये कहना छोड़ दिया है कि हम लोग सॉफ्टवेयर के लिए कब पे करेंगे, तो क्या वो वक्त आएगा जब हम लोग कंटेंट के लिए पे करेंगे and this will be a driving force in more revenues जो कि हमें चाहिए, because it seems कि game industry का जो revenue model है थोड़ा फर्क होगा या है जो आपकी बाकी software industry है. So connecting that with the previous question, what kind of challenges you face, and also adding on a business model has been a tricky thing to work on in local context specifically.
Right. I think the biggest challenge for us has been something that Murad briefly touched upon in what he was talking about. It's been because we all had engineering backgrounds when we came into games, and we were driven by passion for software development. And I think our entire growth trajectory and and the challenges that we faced and our reasons for failures in the past have been due to the fact that we didn't understand the business aspect of it. And the business aspect involves, again, a part of it is, like Murad said, connecting with your audience, and possibly a bigger part of it is, how do you reach out to the same audience? How do you market to them? So marketing itself is a very large discipline, and and it's a very fast-moving, high-tech target these days. People are running, automated artificial intelligence run systems in order to acquire these users, and there are, real-time bidding systems that are competing against each other. So the cost of getting players to actually play your game, completely pushes your product down, because what happens is, as an engineer, you put in your passion, your love. Oh, I have this wonderful game, but you throw it into this sea of other games, and your game is completely invisible. So how do you push it up, right? The days of Flappy Bird is over, because it's a mature market now. There are way too many apps for you to have a realistic chance at making something viral that goes around globally and makes you the money. So it has to be done through very specific marketing methods. And this is where the business model gets extremely tricky and challenging as well. Not only does it involve a lot of production of marketing content, it also involves a lot of money and investment in order to push yourself off the charts. So you have those hundreds and thousands of dollars to even test your game. And the more users you buy, the more expensive it starts getting. So if you hyper casual, what Tintash and a bunch of other companies are involved in now. I'm sure Tintash is doing other activities as well, but this is one of those activities. It's actually primarily it's not about the games. It's actually driven by marketing. So they run advertisements to see whether the advertisements would work, and if the advertisement works, meaning it achieves certain KPIs, as in people are clicking on it, it's not too expensive to acquire the user, only then do they move into the production process. So as engineers coming from an IT background, we were completely oblivious to that. It's always been, this aspect has been what we've stumbled upon and realized much later down the road that this product wasn't market ready, or you weren't ready to market it, and you've burned through all your startup cash or everything you've done, time, money, all your resources, but you weren't working on the other half aspect of it. And additionally, when you are market driven, what you'll realize is that you don't do that much engineering in that scenario. You create minimum viable tests. So in the case of hyper casuals, you don't even create the product. But if you weren't doing hyper casual, you would even then have a similar mindset now, which is you create something that you can test in the market as soon as possible, as cheap as possible, to at least get an idea of whether it's going to fall flat on its face or not. And then you have to gain awareness of all the essential KPIs and metrics that tell you whether this patient is going to survive. I should be using better analogies in times of COVID, but the point is that it's exactly like that. There are all these metrics coming in, and they tell you whether the product will survive or not. So that's been our main challenge. It's been a learning journey, but the later you learn these things along the path, the more resources you've burned and your business is at risk. So it's better to have an understanding of these aspects of the business model, and get mentorship from somebody who does have this understanding, so that you start off on the right footing. Yeah. I guess that's the point about challenges. You had another question as well, but maybe Abbas can answer that.
Sure. Abbas, you're mute. You're still mute. Still mute.
Okay. Yeah. No, sorry. In light of what Faraz and Murad have sort of come up with, I feel they've substantially answered their questions. You want to sort of add on to what they've asked, and you sort of rephrase the question for me so I could add some more?
So they've talked about some of the challenges they had faced in the early days when they were launching, or they were trying to sort of be a product centric and not really thinking about the role of marketing maybe, and the role of the other half, once you have done the engineering part, which is important for selling the games or scaling it up. That's one of the challenges they face. Maybe if you want to sort of talk about it, or maybe any other challenge you thought you had faced in this journey in general in Pakistani context while working in this space.
Okay, so I'm going to add on to what Faraz and Murad have been speaking about. One thing is to actually understand the gaming industry and what the gaming industry actually is. When you're in the entertainment industry, you're essentially in the industry of substitutes. That means that if you're a toy company and you're making board games, then you can play Ludo, you can play Scrabble, or you can play Monopoly. In no way do they actually compete with each other. And this cites back to a case in the 60s. Oh my God, I'm going to start talking now. Where they accidentally launched a Beatles album and a Rolling Stones album at the same time. And what happened was that both albums didn't do well, and they ate at each other's sales. And what was even worse was the band members were friends with each other. So overall, the market reach of both products is basically diluted as a result. So that's the first case that I'll sort of highlight. You have to understand that everything is a substitute for your personal time. When the end user, if they're, and yes, I have the choice between playing video games and watching Netflix every night. And 70% of the time I'll choose a video game because I've got more options available. And when my wife is saying, I've had enough of you playing video games, let's watch something, Netflix will come on, and either I'll be in the room or she'll have kicked me out to watch Grey's Anatomy. So So the thing is all about space and time of the user. A lot of times we think, oh yeah, we put so much effort into building this thing. It's going to be awesome. And here you go, users, and the users don't care. Or your audience does not care because they have so many substitutes that you fail to differentiate yourself, you fail to explain yourself, and you fail to build a relationship at the get-go. And when none of those things have happened and your game has failed, that hurts. But what happens is in the industry, especially the game industry, we've got this option of consistently reiterating and rebuilding and learning off our mistakes. So our cycles for getting better at doing something is a lot faster. The first set of 3D models we made, my first company, Triangle Interactive, were so hideously bad that once we got good enough to actually learn how to build a game, we forgot about those models we built a year ago. For 6 months, we loved those models, but a year down the line, we know, oh, man, this is trash. We should have never made these, or we did them wrong. We gain more experience. So that's one of the things about games. It's a quick, fast learning experience. You have to be very heavily into what you're doing, and games at times will break your heart. They will crush you. There'll be times where you'll go home and you'll be like, I don't think I can do this anymore. Maybe I should have done a job at a bank or something. But the reality is that I'll sort of say something. You get good at making your own stuff, but you're not going to get as good when you start making stuff for other people, because then they start telling you what they want. When we were at Triangle, we were making our own Punjabi video game, Molajat, Shirajat. Go YouTube it. It's got lots of mistakes and errors, and one day I will go back and fix it. But a year down the line, we got to work for IDOs on Tomb Raider. And then we saw the first group of stuff that came to us. And we're like, oh, so that's what it looks like. And then you learn and you get better and better. And that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. So I think, Murad, Abbas has raised a very good point between designing your own product and then also offering services to other people. And then I think both have very different trajectory when you design your own product or when you start offering services. And I must say that, you know, since I moved back to Pakistan and we started looking at the game industry and see what people are doing, there was a lot of debate in the circles that historically we have not done a lot of innovation. There are few very good examples where we can say that we have done some real new product. Otherwise, there was this whole history of these replica games which came out, and then people were able to earn a lot of money. So it's really, we're talking about elephant in the room, that, you know, but there's an argument that as an immature industry which is trying to establish itself, it's fine to take that path and then learn from this exercise, and then you can based on this learning experience, you can bring more creativity and make a product which would be a great hit. And some people say, you know, we should always try to be creative and never ever have a replica game, or never take that path which people think that, oh yeah, ये तो उस जैसी लगती है, उस जैसी लगती है, इन्होंने नया काम नहीं किया, creative काम नहीं किया. Do you subscribe to one of these point of view, or do you think the world is not that simple, or do you think, are we still doing these things? How do you take my question? It is a little complex question to ask, to be honest.
So if I can take a quick pass on that. So the first game, and the one that I think Faraz was also referring to, was that we did on the App Store together. In fact, we collaborated on this. Mindstorm and Tintash built this game together, Fishing Frenzy. That game was a completely innovative game. Like, there was no game like that out there. The phone had an accelerometer control. Jisko use karke you basically would fish. I mean, there were fishing games, but they weren't fishing games like that. There was I think a PC game where a mouse control could do something similar. There was very, very far from being derivative of that. And that game went to the top of the charts, was I think number 7 on the US App Store ranking when it went out. but it made no money. So for us, and we followed up with, another version of it where we said, okay, let's monetize, let's figure out how do we make money from this, levels or kya kya cheezein usme dalte hain, power ups, ye wo. It still didn't make any money. So I think for us, it ended up being like, okay, we can make a fun game, people play, but does it make any money? Like, how do you sustain this effort?
Yeah.
And it's quickly shifted to, okay, let's learn how to make money. And then it was mostly a path of, okay, let's figure out how do people make money, who's making money, and let's see if we can do the same thing. Um, and to be honest now, it is so clear cut. Okay, how do you make money in this industry? It is so crystal clear that it's very difficult to try to go off the, to try to go a different path, because you know what makes money, and it's, you may still not make any money off that. So I mean, I really applaud, for us for, trying something that is unique in a way and is different. It's chess. It was your first game, right? In Turbo Labs, right? But it was a different take on chess, right? And that's what makes it unique, right? How do you make it so it's a different, it's familiar, but still it's different. It's not exactly the same. Because I think that's the kind of innovation you can do in games. You can't do completely different without taking a huge risk, but you can certainly make like large, you can take large steps and make it different. But I would basically say, okay, the what seems sensible to do in games seems to mostly be follow a path someone has taken, make a game like it. That's what these big companies do. Like companies that have billions of dollars at their disposal to spend, even they don't risk going down a completely different path. And if you compare it with like other sectors, like say the movie industry or like books you read, they're established genres, right?
Yeah.
So uske andar rehte hue, it's people innovate. And so I think that's sort of probably the right place to be. That's how I view it.
Yeah. I think a very, very interesting answer. So for us, natural extension to you, it was one of my question which I had to ask, and now Murad ने इसके बारे में बात कर दी है. आपने इतना बड़ा दिल कहाँ से निकाला कि गेम्स में जाना है, टर्बो लैब्स बनानी है, चेस पे काम करना है, and how was this? How did you start? How the journey has been so far? What have you learned? Maybe briefly, and what are you doing there? So what was the whole journey of entrepreneurship in games? कैसे start किया ये?
Oh boy, it's I don't know why we do these things. To be honest, it's almost like spontaneous, momentary thing. I wish it was like a whiteboard and deep analysis with some mentors to tell you not to do it. So it was it was so the sticking point for doing what we're doing is that we wanted to take a platform approach essentially. We weren't. I mean, there were many reasons for doing chess, but one of the reasons was we didn't want to spend time in game design itself. So it's a pre-designed game with existing set of rules. So we didn't want to take that risk that hey, we'd invent some new sort of gameplay and it wouldn't work in the market. What we were more interested in is building the meta game systems around chess. So the fact that having tournaments, having leaderboards, having a skill matching system in place, being able to play with your friends, and all of these things, plus more, come together to form what we call our framework, essentially. And the way we've engineered it and developed is that chess isn't really part of the framework. It's just a game that gets a message that says, "Hey, start." So it could be any game. It could be chess. It could be soccer. It could be a shoot 'em up 2-player game. And then the game just sends the results back to the framework saying that, hey, this guy won or this guy lost. And then everything else goes back into that world where players are chatting with each other and playing with each other. So if you actually think about it, the gameplay itself is completely isolated and it's plug and play. So the vision behind doing chess was exactly that we wanted to build, understand the meta frameworks, build out the technology, and then rapidly build more games into that framework. It so turned out that we've been at it for a while. We're still building the meta framework. It's so big. And that's exactly what Murad said. Essentially, these are the things that monetize. So if you want to understand how things monetize, if you look at just look at reverse engineer the top 50 top grossing games, and you'll start seeing a pattern that this is how people are doing it, right? A majority of the big winners, for example, they all have these loot box chests that fall down, and then you get those items from those chests, and then you use those chests to power up your internal game. So you can take that formula and apply it to any game, as long as the game has some sort of audience and it's moderately entertaining. So that's where we're focused on, and that's why we got into this, was to understand these surrounding systems, and there's a lot to it. So right now, even though we got the engagement right, Chess Stars has achieved, like, the world's highest engagement. So our retention rates for, the amount of people that end up playing for weeks, months, and D30 and D180 is very, very high. But at the same time, we still didn't have enough to build in the monetization mechanics. I mean, we still weren't people were playing, a publisher is happy, everybody's excited, but they're like, why aren't they paying us? So now it's literally, the platform has gone into phase 2, where we're almost starting from scratch, not the retention mechanics, but the monetization mechanics. It's just so much more and more and more. So my advice to anybody, and I think Murad just totally nailed it, would be to replicate, an existing game that does monetize, and innovate upon it, so that you're not 100% clone, but you're just, slightly different, or you're doing something better. And that the process of doing that is what's going to make you into a, mature businessman in this industry in a short time, because you will understand what it takes to monetize players, essentially. So yeah, I hope that answers the question of why we did do chess.
Yeah, Faraz, I have one quick follow-up question before I go to Abbas, and that is that, I remember I was once in a VC session, and उनका हमेशा होता था कि जब भी हमारे पास कोई बंदा गेम्स के लिए पैसे मांगने आएगा तो डिफॉल्ट नो है. मतलब बिफोर यू से कि मुझे पैसे चाहिए अपनी गेम्स कंपनी के लिए, वो कहेंगे नहीं नहीं नहीं, उसके लिए तो नहीं है. आप कोई और बात करें, and they will give you money for all the other things, for flying cars and everything else, but games पे कोई पैसा देने को तैयार नहीं होता था. At least I have seen, but you did manage to raise some money and funds, and hopefully you'll have more in the next rounds. So what is this one thing which is important for the young startups, as well as energetic people, creatives who like to, go into this industry and think about, we need to make the next million or billion out of the game?
Right. I think it comes down to what I spoke about initially, essentially. Hota kya hai ke, the fact that investors aren't putting in money into game startups, I think it's a matter of time. Once there are a few success stories, they'll all fall in line immediately. Because, it's like the Uber exit now. You can just have any sort of, transport startup. People are lining up because, well, Kareem exited for a large amount. It'll be a similar story, I believe, with games as well. But I think while pitching, again, because games are even the simplest game is actually quite a vast product, because a hyper casual game might take you a few weeks to make, but again, there's this massive marketing KPI driven monetization engine behind it. It includes sophisticated ways of displaying ads within the game, sophisticated metrics for acquiring the users, etc. So these are business metrics. So what happens during a game pitch is that none of those metrics actually exist in a typical game pitch, right? They would come up with the idea, hey, this guy's going to run around, this guy's going to shoot, blah blah blah. But really, what you need to be showing them, and I think that would turn over more investors. These are financial minded people. They want to look at numbers. So you want to show them that, hey, I made this game. This is the cost of acquiring a user. This will be the cost of estimated cost of acquiring a user. I actually ran some ads and it cost me $1 to get this user. I ran a slightly larger ad campaign and look, it's scaling to $2 now. You know what? I project that I'll be able to get 100,000, 200,000, a million users for this many dollars. Look, these users played my game for 40% of them were retained for the first day, 10% were retained for D30. Here's my projection curve. Each one of them gives me 5 cents in-app purchases every day, and I'm making 10 cents by showing them advertisements. Look, in 30 days, your return on I will have made up the money that I've spent in marketing. I would have made up 50% of it. In 60 days, I will have made up 100% of it. In 180 days, I will be giving you a profit. So this is a business, and this is the language that investors can understand. But if you tell them I'm going to, people are going to blow each other's brains out, they probably don't want to put down money for that. So I think the language needs to change, the focus needs to change, and this is critical for the games industry as a whole. It's not, you have to choose whether you're going into a business or you're going to want to do a passion project because you're just into games. It's completely different. So that decision is fundamentally important. And then once you do make a decision of going into business, then you need to start thinking like a businessman. And this is, I think, the single most important deciding factor with that, whether you'll be able to convince an investor to put in money into your startup or not.
Yeah. And I think you've also nicely answered another question which I wanted to ask is that the best gamers on earth might not be the best game developers as well as the best companies, so it's a very different ball game altogether. So very nicely answered for us. So Abbas, coming to you, my next question is actually on the creative process within the game industry and within your company. Many people think it's a mystery process, especially students don't really understand that how the whole this game development process work in different companies. So if you could kindly highlight that how your company works and what is this complete development process from ideation all the way to going online and selling it, वो क्या process आपकी company का?
Okay. So basically what we do is we have basically two lines, which I sort of work with my team on. One is that to understand how to build content and IP. And with that, what we do with the content team specifically is when they're not on projects, they're basically creating comics. And the reason why we do comic books is that it allows us to quickly interact with users, building platforms or ideas and seeing what's trending. A lot of the time what you see in the comic industry platforms like webtoons and things like that, if you see something is kicking in and it's working, then you can essentially take it to the next level and start building a game. Now, from the process, we essentially look at it from multiple perspectives. One is the experience perspective. We look at user experience. That basically combines the UX team, the game designers, and the narrative writers, and basically what I call the white boxing team, which basically builds a white box of their idea in Unity very quickly. This is a 2 to 3 week ideation process. So within that, we quickly build it up and we do an internal test. Is this fun? And the one question that we consistently, and I harp on people is, do you think it's fun because you built it? Or do you think it's fun because it is fun? One time somebody wanted to make a game about the cats in our office. I was like, sure. And the first thing that I looked at it and I was like, nobody in their right mind is going to freaking play this game. And that comes from learning from years of building games and products and ideas. And the first thing I had to ask the people was, you're thinking that people actually give a damn about the cats in our office. And that was a very mean way of me putting it this way directly. And I said, they don't build this, they have to feel the same stuff as we do with our own office cats. They don't care about them. So work it again. So the idea is that what we do is that right now we've got a game under development. And I cannot tell you what it is. It's a test game, basically. And it's going to basically set it towards, it's going to reskin towards 2 sets of audiences just to mediate and see their response and who picks it up more, who is angrier, about a certain situation. That's what the game essentially is. So one side will be serving a group that we actually agree with. On one side is a group of people that we don't agree with, but somehow they don't actually admit that they actually like this, but in reality, the results said that they did actually like this. It's called gender bias, basically. Not gender bias, it's basically cognitive bias by that. That's an example of something we did. Another game we did was the United Nations basically said, can you build something about soliciting gender bias in an office space? And I said, well, I've done office games before, but everyone lies on HR polls. You send a survey out and you say, hey, are you sexist? You say, no, I'm not sexist at all. I want more women in the office. Can I have my promotion and raise? In reality, that's not the truth. So we created a game instead of a survey, and we made everyone participate in it. And we ran across Islamabad through major FMCGs, development sector organizations, animation, game studios, even incubation center. We had a 97% effective rate of actually figuring out whether this person had a gender bias or not. Then we, of course, we handed over the report to the HR department, said, there you go, see you later. And they were like, well, our surveys had something else than what your report is saying, but we know these people enough to say that our surveys were bullshit, but your results that we're getting from your game are a lot more correct. And that's where games are more effective. So that's another thing I was just sort of, okay, I've gone on a tangent, my apologies.
Could I add a little bit to this? So for us, basically there's, for Tintash, and I think this is probably similar for a bunch of other studios, there are specific roles that people have. There's this role of a game designer. There's a role of a UX or UI artist or designer. And there's a role of a game producer. Those are the three roles that are on top of, say, a game engine programmer or a game engineer. And then on the game engineer side, there might be someone who perhaps might be focused on backend. So you might have a server engineer, and you might have someone who understands Unity or Unreal, one of the game engines, and builds the sort of game logic. The game producer is sort of the person who is similar to if you were in, say, making a movie or a TV show, is the person who's supposed to get the whole team together. So he's sort of the person who's going to help coordinate, who's going to help sort of fill out some of the gaps in understanding of different teams, kind of bring everything, sort of the vision together and like coordinate amongst the team. So for a typical software project, that might be like a project manager, but in this case, this person also knows a lot about games. They have been exposed to games, they like to play games, they understand the genres, they have experience with marketing, those kind of things also. They may have some knowledge of like how game economies work. Game designer is typically the hardest role to fill. And I think in our case, we've typically found that it's either someone who loves playing games and just played so much of them, has had so much exposure, that they've developed sort of an intuition for what games are like. And they've done like what, Faraz was saying earlier, they've deconstructed games. They've sort of thought about how each element works with, the other element in the game. So there's actually a whole bunch of blogs that you can read also to develop that, Deconstructor of Fun, and, Gamma Sutra has a lot of postmortems on games. So you can read up on those things. But there's really, apart from that reading and like exposure, there isn't really a lot of formal training, which people have gone through to become a game designer. And in our case, usually it's someone who's maybe moved from software engineering into that role, sometimes from art into that role. And then there's this entire sort of art team, which sits separately from this. And they might be doing initially, when you're at an early stage of the design, concept art. So they might be just creating the characters, the environments, and sort of creating those in 2D sketches. And then someone might take that and then actually develop like a sort of a theme. They might actually figure out, the textures and the colors and, what it would look like in a sort of finished environment. And then you have 3D modelers and animators. So it can be a pretty large team that's working on production. But all of us, we try to initially set up a very small team one of each perhaps. And then we try to develop like a POC or a first level and see if, like, Abbas was saying, see if it's fun or not. And then from that, we'll build more. So you then start developing level, features, and then start developing game economy features, and then you start adding monetization features. So it's sort of this layered approach, and you develop it over time. So it's a very comprehensive project to do, very complicated.
Yeah. No, that I think this is very important for the audience, especially students watching, for them to know. And for us, very quickly, if you can comment on that how different it is in a startup like yours. I'm sure you'll not have 50 people, but they'll be doing the similar things altogether. So maybe a single person will be acting and taking multiple roles. So how is it different in your context?
Well, it's exactly how Murad said. It is a 50% team, even if you're a startup. It's just that you have to be 10 persons by yourself.
Okay.
You cannot. All the job functions are essentially required, and and how we've pulled along is we've got people who can play multiple roles, but that's always a compromise in the long run. If you realize it causes delays, and you can't pay enough attention to so many aspects. Like, for example, if you're doing both engineering and game design at the same time, one aspect is going to not get enough attention, essentially. So you do have to deconstruct your project correctly. You have to understand every role that's required to fulfill each function in order to deliver it. And you should always raise enough money so that you can actually go at it. If you try to put in multiple hats, you're going to run into all sorts of problems. So that's important. Yeah, you gotta have the 360 degrees team in order to do it. And that's our goal as well. I mean, we constantly want to grow and have dedicated people for every role.
Yeah. Murad, coming back to you. Sorry, I'm coming back to you quickly on this. I have seen people complaining that we started as a young, niche, small, dedicated design or game studio, but that as there's a growth, culture change ho gaya, हमारा काम करने का तरीका change हो गया, and it was very difficult to maintain the same maybe creative culture or maybe the same kind of a culture you begin with maybe 15 years ago. So have you seen a similar thing in your own company while growth? And if yes, how did you try to tackle that? Especially with
yes, I think there's always the risk of that happening, and the way we've tried to. So we were, I think, conscious about the risk as we were growing, and one of the things we tried to do was to to place people in the organization in management roles, whether it was a project manager or a team manager, who understood how we were thinking about team members and how they should think about their team members, and sort of created not a hierarchy, if you will, but more of like these sort of cells of independent groups of people who could coordinate and work well together, and just try to encourage the same culture amongst them. This is how you give feedback. This is how you help tell someone if they're on the wrong path. This is how you help them resolve disciplinary issues. So that's basically how we tried to do it. And when I today walk in the office, there are many people I don't recognize. I haven't even interacted with them that frequently, but I know how their team members are the bonds they are creating with their own team members, and I have visibility into that. So for that, we did invest in some tools so we could ensure that our team members were communicating, they were having these discussions, we were training them about this. So I think it has to be planned in that sense. You can't control it. You have to enable other people to do it and sort of create miniature clones of yourself, if you will, in the form of the company culture, and try to address it that way.
I remember somebody telling me कि सर वो अच्छा खासा game studio था, अब software house बना दिया. And so people have this very different association कि एक creative studio या design studio या game studio कैसा होगा, or एक software house कैसा होगा, more like a factory or a foundry. as compared to this creative space. So I think लोगों की expectation काफी फर्क होती हैं, especially young graduates की जब उन जगहों पे जाते हैं. So Abbas, coming to you, my second last question is actually on how can students and young graduates, knowing your own design processes where you have very specific roles for each and every discipline and activity, how students who are currently enrolled or how young graduates can become a part of your company or can become a part of your a part of this game industry? What do you look at? What can they do? How can they polish themselves while being in university?
Okay, so okay, if you're looking from a technical standpoint, just finish your degree and don't cheat on your exams and do your part in your final year project. I will know all these things when I interview you, and I'll find out like within 5 minutes because I've done this a lot. Uh, for me, the most important thing is fine, you got all these things down. But for me, the most important thing is I want to see if I have a good person in front of me, like a good human being. Um, what most people don't know about Optera is that we're actually a for good company. We don't pick up any projects from clients or do any products that bring about harm in any form. And that's because I've spent a lot of time in the gaming industry. I know how analytics work. I know how to change a button and it'll change someone's bathroom decision the next moment. We can do all of that. That's how good we are at what we do. For me, I want to see a good, hardworking human being. I want to see somebody who takes the time out to wonder, somebody who has an imagination, and he cares about, or they, sorry, they care about the people next to them. And there's something called I call being a good teammate. That means that you may be junior and your senior struggling, go out there and help them out as much as possible. There are many times as a CEO where I've actually just gone up and I've said, listen, I think you're struggling. How about I just do this intern level work for you so you can focus on the task at hand? And that's essentially the type of culture Optera has. That one, we are probably the only company that you can think of that is right now grew in the pandemic and is 70-30 gender balance and towards the women. That means we have more women than men. Men are harder to find for Optera than women nowadays. We're just sort of like, we're at 35 or 40 people right now. And I'm like, that's the thing. But I really care about if I see a good human being in front of me, if I see somebody who cares, somebody who has a good set of moral values, and they care about who they work with. The degree, everything else, technical skill, those things can be taught, man. I mean, you forgot to learn how to use GitHub that day and didn't commit your changes. Well, I'll tell you, your lead will just take you to the side and say, hey, this is how you do it tomorrow. And you keep on doing that, HR will take care of you. But if you are a good human being that cares about the people around him and the quality of work they put in and they care about growing, then that's very important. I'll give you an example of Optera. Optera basically has, anybody who's come to Optera has, and if they've left after 3 years, they've gone out to do bigger and better things. And when people go out and hire them, they see that, wow, that's a really good human being. We want to work with them. They're really cool.
Sure.
Your CV skills, your technical skills, great, good for you. I mean, it'll be caught. You'll be found if you're technically up not good. Go ahead and work on that. Work on being a good human being. Work on somebody I want to work with. Like when you see Faraz, right? The first thing I saw about him was like, I wish I'd met him like 10, 15 years ago. I would have loved to work with him. Because, not only is he a good, solid engineer, you can tell he's a good human being. The same thing with Murad. I actually do look for Tintash in senior portfolio, senior resumes when I get them. Because I know, oh, good, he's got a bit of polish in him and he's probably a good human being and he knows what to do. So here, I think we could probably go out and hire him. These sort of things we look for.
Very good.
Right.
So for us, coming to you, let's this is really good to know that there are more important skills than the hardcore technical skills. But certainly for me as a somebody in academia, I have to train my kids so that they can solve a very particular problem. So they are able to drag and drop in Unity, and they're able to actually write a basic code, or they're able to actually do some basic AI. So really thinking in terms of that, imagine there's a third-year student, a sophomore or rising senior. or maybe a fresh graduate, what do they need to do in their final year to be able, and if they're passionate about game industry, if they really want to work in game industry, what do they look at and work on so that they are a good fit for your company, they're a good fit for the local industry?
Right. I think this question would apply to any industry as such, I suppose. What's important to recognize is the basic principles at play. What you have is that you have a lot of uh, broad disciplines in the sense there's artwork, there's software engineering, there's game design, there's even HR skills like Abbas said, there's uh, project management involved. Uh, Now, there's that broader set of skills, and then each discipline itself has a very deep vertical. You can go to the nth level in that. You could write basic code that works, or you could write very scalable or highly performant code, which requires much larger architectural understanding of software. Similarly, with art, you could make a basic character, that's a little stiff, but it does the job. Or you could do a very fluid, Disney level sort of animation there. So I think that what I would advise students who are trying to get into the gaming industry is to focus on the broad aspect first, right? Don't try to be a super duper, hardcore engineer in games right now. You don't need to, learn how to program shaders in Vulkan or, some new hardcore graphics API. What you do need though is at the very basic level, you should understand how all of these things come together. That's the first step, right? And that would involve doing a small project by yourself or just with one other person. So when a small team does something broad, you're naturally exposed to all of the disciplines. From there, you start to understand many aspects about the actual game, what sort of team you would need if you were to do it in the real world. And you'll also start to understand things about yourself that, oh, I find art really intimidating, or this is not my thing. Or maybe, hey, I'm really into the game design aspect and I don't want to do this. So you need to get your hands dirty with a project, have some broad exposure, identify your strengths, and then focus on those. And I think that what I've done personally is I've always been a jack of all trades, but a master of none. I'm not good at anything, I would say, officially, if somebody asks me in games. But you know what? I've messed around with everything. So that gave me, the ability to work with a team, in a leadership position, because now I can sort of at least have a basic understanding of what the experts can do, and then I can put these things together. So you have to understand the many components that are coming into play, and especially for people who are starting off, the biggest the biggest thing is that when a new joiner joins our company is that I think what's restrictive for us is when they don't have enough exposure to the other disciplines. So if he has no idea how art works and he just knows how to code, there are going to be problems in terms of team work. So I would expect that I'd like all my engineers to know how to operate Photoshop or know the basics of 3D. So when you start off with a broader, try to be a jack of all trades initially. That's the right approach in learning, and that's achieved by simply doing a project, and then you can find your discipline. If you're passionate about going vertical, being a tech expert in a certain area, most certainly do. But you got to know how things work overall, including the business, which is never taught at school for some reason, unless you go to business school.
Murad, you have been teaching also at LUMS, so you'll be in a better position also to comment on that. And also, I think this जो बात अभी फराज ने की है, I think this is very, very important. कि we really completely missed the other half, and that is that कि चीज़ बनाने के बाद बेचनी कैसे है. And I think especially when we are focusing a lot on entrepreneurship, it has become very valuable because otherwise it brings lots of disappointment. Okay, I with a 4 CGPA, with the best mind and the brain, and with the best design ever on earth, I'm unable to make money. So how would you sort of connect that? And what do you think our responsibility is in academia?
Absolutely. So first, I'll give the boring answer, which is, in terms of the courses someone should take, if say they're an engineer, and that they should take seriously, if they want to become a game engineer. Because I've often run across students who say, "Oh, हाँ जी, मैंने लिया था, मुझे अब सब कुछ भूल गया." One is linear algebra. You need to know transformations. You need to understand matrices, vectors, all those things. You may not need them the first year you're a game programmer. You will need them down the road. The second is calculus. You will come across some situation where you will have to think about curves and how do surfaces work, and it can be very, very helpful if you are going to dive into machine learning. ये basics कम से कम दोनों आती हो for any game project or similar that you work on. And then specifically in terms of programming courses, a computer graphics course, a computer vision course can be helpful, but computer graphics for sure. Yes, you can use Unity and Unreal, but you should know how to develop, shaders yourself. You should know how to, write code that can, do 2D and 3D transformations. A networking course, so like how to handle concurrency, how to handle like bandwidth constraints and latency issues and synchronization, and an AI course, because games, almost all of them have some kind of AI at some aspect. So you should know at least what the basic techniques are. For instance, if you're programming chess, you need an engine that can play against you. You need to know how to develop the AI, right? So ये तो बिल्कुल basic हैं. You need to know these things, before you graduate if you want to enter games as an industry. And then as far as the business side is concerned, वहाँ पे, so I would just say for academia, it's really important that there be opportunities for students to take courses across different departments if possible. Because I think there's a lot of learning that happens with your colleagues, your student, like fellow students. It's not just the books and so on. It's their exposure, their experience, and working on projects together. So barring anything else, try that in your final year project if it's possible. If this, university doesn't create the environment, create it yourself. When I was doing my undergrad, I had in the computer science final year project, I had a mechanical engineer with me because we were making a robot. And so he didn't have to do that. He just took it on as an elective for himself. I just convinced him, like, yeah, Ajo, let's do this together. Right? And so I think just trying to be a little innovative about that could be very helpful. Convince an MBA student to spend the summer with you, when you're working on your final year project. There are many of them that love games, reach out and meet them at the gym, talk to them, and, just be open about it. That's what I would encourage students to do.
And very quickly, if you can give some insights and some ideas for those who are not from a tech background, they still want to be the part of game industry. So, for example, these recommendations are primarily for those who come with an engineering or CS background. Where there'll be people from NCA or from BNU or from Indus Valley, and they love playing games as well as they love designing games. So for them, the path can be a little different. So, any quick insights on that?
I'll take a very quick pass and then let others chime in. Basically, there are now tools that allow you to do some of these things fairly quickly and easily without knowing a lot of engineering. You can use there are a lot of HTML5 design tools you can use to make simple browser-based games. And then even like some of the core games, people have engines that they're building that you can use without knowing a lot of programming. The very basic thing you can start off with are mods, which is like from way back, 80s mein log mods banate the, which is just, take a game and usme, make the artwork and integrate it. And that, creates essentially a new game with a new theme, a new look and feel. And, I think that's a good place to start, but, from scratch all the way to like, Unity, there are many plugins available for Unity, which you can use straight off, which may have, say, a racing game engine already built, and then you can play around with the art. So that's what I would suggest. I'd say, start exploring the tools, even if they seem scary, they're not necessarily, and you don't necessarily need a lot of programming experience, or even a lot, even one course might be enough to get you going.
Sure.
you know.
We're running out of time, but my last question and maybe a quick answer would help, and that is that for all three of you, gaming industry in Pakistan in 2030, where do you see us going? Abbas, you, and then Faraz. You're mute.
Okay, so this comes more from having a bird's eye view of the industry as IGDH here. So um, I felt that for the longest time we weren't capable of really coming together as an industry and coming together. But over the past 3, 4 years, especially with the maturation of tools, for example, Unreal Engine and a lot of that, a lot of the gaming companies have built specialties in what they do through services work or through specialization, or they build middleware or stuff like that. My company Optera is very strong in UX and narrative design. We rock that boat like anything. And we're very good at building VR middleware and AR middleware. Um, when you look at what I call good engineering companies, I think Tintash is a good engineering product company. Turbo Labs, the verdict is still out on you guys. So, but I feel like from what I've been hearing, guys, I mean, you guys are really learning at a very fast rate. And then there's other companies, VR Play, Mindstorm, and a couple of others. They're all specialized in what they're doing. It's only a matter of time where us old middle-aged men, the people that you see over here, um,
Not
I'm
Faraz.
from the first, yeah, I'm from the first generation of game developers. You guys are kind of like the second generation, Faraz and Murad, even though you guys, I think you guys are older than me, which is weird. And then there's the third generation, and now the fourth and fifth generations are merging. I feel that the fourth and fifth generation are going to put it together. And I see that Pakistan will probably put out a AA game in the next 3 to 4 years. Uh, I assumed it was going to be around 2022, but then I factored in the pandemic and that slowed a few things down. But I feel that people will leave our companies, set up their own companies, and eventually put together a AA game. And the reason is, I was what Murad was saying earlier about how easy it is to prototype games. I used to build mods. That's how I started. Um, my friend Bakar, he is an owner of Quixel, and they got acquired by Unreal and Epic. And so he said, "Hey, why don't you try out this Epic Learn Unreal thing?" I said, "Sure." I learned Unreal Engine in like 2 weeks. I could pretty much do what I wanted to do. Uh, 10 years ago I could do most of what I want to do without an engineering. I could literally download modules, kit bash them together, and get something running, like a good prototype running. And that's how I use my vacation time when my wife is angry at me. But the thing is, it's really easy to make games now. At least prototyping your first game by yourself or with your friend, just to get people to, and uploading it on HIO and letting people play it. And now's the best time. Just go and learn.
Okay,
And yeah, it's
excellent.
learn Unreal at epicgames.com or something like that. Just try it
Sure.
out.
Excellent. Faraz, quickly, what do you think? 2030 and us?
I think that's looking too far ahead because we have to catch up to the present right now.
Okay.
It's a fast-moving target. There are opportunities, for example, hyper-casual opportunity came up recently, and then people have started cashing in on that and developing in that space. But again, that's also probably that market matures also very quickly. So I think it's all going to be about trends and platforms, see how those platforms evolve. And I think our industry will shape ourselves. It has to latch onto those opportunities essentially. Growth wise, there is, to be honest, there's not, there isn't like some epic news making expansion happening within our industry. We don't have that momentum at this time. In fact, competition is getting much harder, and everybody should be aware of that. I mean, there are gigantic companies that are attacking every possible opportunity and genre, and they do that in mind-boggling speed. I mean, literally, you were talking about clones. It's like if you launch a game today, there'll be a clone live tomorrow. I don't even know who's sitting there and who's doing that, but that's exactly what's happening. So it's a very, to be realistic, it's a very competitive, trend-based space, and and will always probably be a factor of the computer science students and the art students and the multidisciplinary students that we're generating into the market, into the workforce. certain percentage of it falls into gaming. They're pulled in by these gaming companies, but at the same time these gaming companies are driven by the market dynamics, which are changing. I think every 12 months they'll be completely different. So 10 years from now, I would be lying if I can predict what would
Sure.
happen.
Murad, we'll end with you. So
I think we'll finally crack, the local theme, local culture, gaming. How do you do it? That problem. I feel like the trends in the sort of 3D animated movie space is opening those doors. Like the kind of movies people have made and have made money from those. I think the next thing is going to be games. We're going to figure out how to do that. Globally, I think we'll still be catching up. It's very hard, but we might have some success stories that are that are multinational. I think there's actually a lot of potential of that, where there's some team member here, there's some team member in Singapore, there's some team member in China, someone in the US. Those kind of, I think, companies could produce massive global hits by 2030.
Excellent. So on this note, I'd like to thank you all, and I'll say that it was very exciting to talk to you and see what you have done, what are you doing, and where are you heading towards. And I think for the audience, specifically the students, the young graduates who are listening to us, I think this seems still like a very exciting area. There are companies have established their names. They're looking into this domain. They want to expand, and they're looking for people who are really passionate about it with the right skills. So I think many of you also in classrooms and in other discussions ask about, how to be a part of it. And today you have learned also, it's not that difficult to be a part of it. It's still a different type of a software industry, which with its own culture and the way of working. So if you have the right skills, and if you're a good human being, as Abbas said, you're very welcome there. So I wish you all very best of luck for that also. And thank you very much, all the panelists, for coming here and for your time. It was really a wonderful session on this topic, a very rare session we have in Pakistan on these topics. I hope we can continue with these sessions to support the industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.